NetMoverSitan. Welcome to the Urban Plague section of the Lore Breakdown series. Now, if you think this is going to get infectious, don't worry, it won't. Well, not in the conventional way, anyway. An urban plague is an infectious disease found in rats that live around humans in urban areas. It's caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, which is the bacterium that causes bubonic and pneumonic plague in humans, otherwise known as the Black Death. Now, it's not as literal in this case, but it's worse than an urban legend, as the threat is becoming more real. First thing to go over in this section is the Carnival. Now, this syndicate is made up of cybernetic monstrosities that eat people. And no, it's not because they're from District 23. This has a more practical, if disgusting, purpose. It's to make a high-quality fabric that some groups use to provide protection in their work. They're called tealers, due to the silk that they provide. As for how it's made, explanations include melting flesh, congealing it into a mold, and even unraveling the flesh into a thread. Well, however it's done, the silk itself has the qualities of the one that it used to make up and was turned into. For example, if they ate an agile person, the silk would make the wearer more agile. If they ate someone that was more perceptive, the wearer would become more perceptive of their surroundings. Let's hope they don't eat the wrong person, as if they ate someone who was a blood knight, that would make the wearer a liability to those around them, as they'd only believe that they were invincible, and end up getting cut open by someone that has some actual ability to back that up. They might look vaguely human, but it's when they open up and do their work that their insides are revealed. So no violating the AI ethics amendment in this case, as the robes are meant to hide the nasty-looking weaving equipment. You also can't just buy their wares from them, even if you have the money. You need to build a relationship with them, and this takes time, whether you be a fixer or part of a more prominent syndicate. As for where the technology came from, it came from another wing that fell, and the patent expired. The syndicate is made up of Alpha, Beta, and Gamma. There are differences between them, but not much. They each have mostly the same function and speak in a similar manner. They are largely united in their purpose. They're mostly independent, making fabric for whoever they've built a relationship with and those that are willing to pay for them. Those two conditions are not exclusive to each other. There are a few exceptions. They have no moral issues. They just do what they need to in order to survive. I mean, those parts on them, they don't replace themselves. The The Carnival are prided on being independent, as most of those in their profession have an exclusive contract with an organization. Their fabric is in high demand, and you can't exactly walk into any old shop and buy it. Not even in a nest. As for the part they play in the story, well, the carnival was feasting on some sweepers. Ironic, considering what the sweepers do. The taste was disgusting in a number of ways. Similar to a fixer that they tasted. They were hard to eat. The fixers, but tasty to them, which provided good silk. What is it with eating humans in this city? I know that it's not for simple survival. It's to make fabric. The sweepers probably make fabric that's accelerated healing. Anyway, they're doing this as part of a prescript delivered by the Index, one of the fingers, one of the few organizations that they're unwilling to refuse. The prescript involved eating sweepers to extract silk from, to make the fabric from, but not to supply it to them, just to make it. This is even though there's a risk that the mother of the sweepers might come for them. They're also concerned that the sweepers might engage in reprisals. Thankfully, they're quiet for now. It's unclear why. All that matters is that the prescript is followed, as the Index is watching them. Largely to make sure that they carry it out, as there are limits to their patience. They later met Jan, one of the messengers of the Index. They greeted him, and he handed them a new prescript. Head to the library. He also gave them the invitation that they need to enter. They considered eating Jan, and despite him making good silk, he was clear when he said that the prescript must be obeyed. Otherwise, the proxies would be sent to tear them apart. Yeah. While others take protection money, the Index, it's less about this, and more about carrying out what is sent. The proxies are just a stick. Where's the carrot? As Jan was leaving, the Kurokumo clan, a subsidiary of the Fun, another of the fingers, arrived to accept the nouveau fabric that the carnival had weaved. Their leader, Seo, the leader of this group anyway, had a briefcase with their payment handed to the carnival. She considered it frivolous behavior from the Index, that close to the finger bow bell. They considered taking Jan on, but they decided that it just wasn't worth it. Not because they couldn't take him, but because they had other things to take care of. They went their separate ways after that. Upon watching this, Angela had it explained by Roland that quality fabric was rare, the tailoring profession being just as important as syndicates and fixers. Angela didn't understand what was so good about the fabric, but Roland explained that just because the attire looks normal, it isn't. High quality fabric can provide It can provide just as much protection as an augmentation procedure, which in some cases requires workshop or tailor membership. It was almost overwhelming to Angela, so Roland told her to close her eyes and make a wish. She eventually complied, with some annoyance. She wished for Roland to stop babbling nonsense. He kind of had his coming that time. Roland had some concerns about the prescripts pointing at the library, as that means that the index has its eyes on that place, and they're coming for their is. One of the 5 biggest syndicates that rule over the backstreets, largely because the wings couldn't be bothered to destroy them. That and the fingers have power that rivals that of the wings. So that makes it a problem as well. They're called fingers as they literally have the backstreets in their hands. As for the index, they're a zealous lot. They obsess over the prescripts, which are orders to be obeyed. And on top of that is a subsidiary of the thumb. Roland fears things escalating faster than escalator on its highest setting under a power surge. As for what Angela thinks of this situation, well, she didn't share his concern. When the carnival arrived, they were looking for a new kind of friend. Then, Angela greeted them. They greeted back and asked if she was okay to eat. Strange greeting, although they understood that she might taste worse than the sweepers, as they could tell that she wasn't human. This annoyed Angela, and she failed to see the point of a proper farewell to them. They commented on her rudeness and entered the library proper. They were then wiped out. After that, Roland spoke like the carnival and asked, "Exhausted, tired, want rest, hungry, want out?" And Angela replied with, "Want amputated, bones melt, flesh explode, won't die?" Clearly, irony, satire, and imitation are concepts that Angela is familiar with. Roughly translated, Roland said, "Are you exhausted and tired? Do you want to rest? Are you hungry and want out?" And Angela said, she replied, "Want to be amputated again or have your bones melt or flesh explode? You'll be unable to die from that." Roland wisely backs off, not wanting to put that to the test. Although he was serious when he said that at least one of the fingers would be confronted, based on how things were going, such as the thumb and the index. Angela was actually looking forward to it. Roland wasn't amused by this, as he and the others would do the fighting for her. She's like the generals in their offices, far from the front lines in the First World War, not worrying about dying, as they're not where the dying is. Yet she's thankful for what he does. Hard to know if that's just lip service. Next we have the full stop office. Now, this office is an oddity, as they're one of the few that uses firearms, something that's both expensive and hard to come by in the city, due to a mix of needing a license to make them, and because there's a tax heavier than the metal that comes out of Ramstein, and just as deep on the expenses as their accents. There's also quite a low demand for it. They're an associate office of the Shi Association, an association that specializes in assassination. To make the most of their expensive gear, they ambush their targets and take them down quick enough to prevent them from reacting too quickly. Well, they can't run for cover if they can't see it coming. Unfortunately, it makes them ill-equipped for extended combat, especially with their weapons weighing them down. First we have Lewe, a fixer of the Full Stop office. He wields a lighter gun that allows him to engage his target in melee. That gives him an advantage over the other fixers. He sees that getting a colour has appeal to him. It's a dream and a lifetime goal of a fixer. Colours being the elites of the fixers, those with the ability and power that surpasses most others. Something to aspire to. Those that can afford to operate independently. Colours are assigned by the Hana Association when they're considered to be ideal for that role, although this is forcibly done to those Class 1s that attract enough attention. Freedom that's forced on them? Quite a contradiction, isn't it? He believes that they're called colours as it's easier to remember. They have nothing in common, their own ways of working, and they have their own vibrant characteristics. Well, considering one such fixer, I can understand why he'd say that. He understands what's needed for survival, even if it might be costly. He also focuses on what matters rather than give in to idle speculation. Next we have Tamaki. She's the hot-headed sniper of this fixer office. Well, I say this because her gun appears to be more suited for long-range combat. At least as far as she's been able to acquire, as she understands how difficult it is to get a license to make guns, never mind be able to afford them. As for what the ethics law is, it makes sure that the bigger the gun's caliber, the shorter the barrel must be. It also mustn't be armor-piercing, so no shooting through walls, and silencers are legal. Yeah, the shots need to be audible, and those aren't the bad ones. Yeah, there's even a clause in there somewhere that forbids research into or even imagining technology that violates manufacturing guidelines, as provided by the head, along with the license. She might not know why that is. It's said that it's because the head didn't want its denizens to be harmed too easily. So that's why they put heavier restrictions on firearms than in Britain. I think not, as that implies they actually give a about those they rule over. No. It's more likely to make sure that killing is as messy as hell itself after the Doom guy has paid a visit there. For a start, shortening the barrel would reduce the effective range. One workshop that makes firearms and the ammo that they fire is Atelier Logic. Well, it was the one that the Full Stop office purchased them from. Yeah, the Full Stop office. Not many workshops are allowed to make S-class weapons, as in those that are the best that's available for the city. Perhaps 3 to 5 of them, which likely take requests from our corps, as the Rabbit team in Lebosmy Corporation had some pretty devastating firearms on them that can take care of almost any threats. Tamaki was unable to find them. All she could find was a rumour of one existing. I mean, the wings could improve on the designs, but it's likely that they wouldn't, as they didn't want the head to send some nasty people to give them a long and drawn-out death. Although she might ask why there are some restrictions, she knows better than to dig into it too much, and not just because they have their own problems. It's also because they're afraid of a claw crashing through the door and going sub-zero on them for meddling with things that the head didn't want them to. When it matters the most, she's the most in control over her emotions. She just gets on with the task with minimal chatter. And she's the most optimistic of the 3. Hard to believe, isn't it? Finally, we have Stefan. He has a big, heavy rifle that's likely to be not as accurate as Tamaki's. He understands how expensive they can be. He knows that he has to be quick and shoot the weak spots, as if they aren't taken down quickly, he wouldn't be able to get away quickly without some form of augmentation procedure, which is also required to use them effectively when first using them without practicing, at least without shoulder dislocation or severed fingers due to being unprepared for the recoil. What about deafness due to the noise that they're required to make? He knows that ambush tactics are needed to maximize the effectiveness. I mean, it costs about as much, if not less, to get workshop equipment or an augmentation procedure as it costs to buy bullets for target practice. As for workshop devices that muffle gunfire sounds, good luck with that. That's illegal. Yeah, his rifle is more suited for rapid firing. He's also the least patient of the 3. Not a good quality within an office that specializes in quick and precise executions.
The story continued at the oratory of the Church of Gears, which had been designated an urban legend class threat, where their leader Eileen had started the day's worship session with a new worshipper who was there because living in that city was getting too much for them. And just based on what happened so far, I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. As for what Eileen wanted to know, she wanted to know what had gotten too much for them. It was because everything had become more dreary than a Tim Burton movie, which was certainly a match for their life. A life where they wake up at 6, go to work at 8, and does the same thing over and over again until 10. You and Angela should spend time with each other. She'd make your problems seem as serious as an early Jim Carrey movie. But joking aside,
14 hours a day? 98 hours? At most a week? I mean, it's unhealthy to work more than 60 hours a week. I mean, that's almost a Japanese work ethic. You're working yourself to death? I'm not surprised that you can't take it anymore. You certainly don't know what you're doing, and as for not getting any richer, the expenses covered every month is partially due to the head and the wings cornering the market. I doubt they'd want you to get any richer, even if you were able to, as it makes you easier to control. It's not just this person. Well, money, life, it had no meaning to them anymore. They see themselves as a cog in a machine, one that's expendable and easily replaced in the event that he disappeared. Eileen recognized that feeling, a gear spinning without a purpose, where staying in the middle would wear them out. Slowly. Which was how this worshipper was feeling, even though she didn't see it as a bad thing to be a gear. Seeing all problems stemming from the refusal to admit that they're gears themselves. Even she felt like that after her father passed away. She was lost after that. Her father lived his life akin to a gear wheel, living a similar life to that worshipper, although her father researched gears, all to solve the problems that the worshipper was going through, unknowingly growing to resemble the objects that he studied. The stress had prematurely aged him, until he was killed by someone. Sometime after that, she came to the realization that they might really be gears. Gears that constitute the city, where their suffering comes from trying to deny this identity. Roland, this is a shady cult. As for what this worshipper thought of this, spiritual guidance, they were confused by this. They were tired of being a purposeless cog that kept running. Eileen then told them that the problem was that they saw themselves as aimless, that they had a purpose, and all they needed to do was to find it and mesh with it. She sees all as gears, many wallowing in sadness, that might only be surpassed by depression sufferers due to not knowing their purpose. The others around them looked happy, apparently. She then asked them to trust in her. They accepted by more or less saying, "It. I've got nothing left to lose that's worth it." She then brought them to an ornate chair to give them the purpose that they were looking for. A chair that covered the top half of their head, which, like the sorting hat of the Harry Potter stories, choosing the houses, this chair told them the kind of gear that they were. It was the best comparison I could think of, so don't judge me. Eileen assured them that it was safe. As for what kind of gear they were fort gear. It's probably rarer to find those with at least some resilience to the disease of the soul than to find one of those. Her father was one of those. It was then that the worshipper realized too late how the gears were made. It involved a messy process that killed the one that it was that it was made from. The gear on her head was made from her father, who guided her. She also mentioned meat gears, and she then said that pain was temporary. Yeah, it's called a painful death, Aileen. The worshippers rejoiced, observing this, and treated this act of murder with celebration. As the gears turn, so does the life they live fulfill its cycle. Well, that's how Aileen put it. But as this was going on, she was being watched. It was the fixers of the Full Stop office, Lewe, Tamaki, and Stefan, associates of the Shi Association. Armed with their guns, they were watching this in all of its graphic detail. Stefan recognized Eileen as the cult leader. Lewe commented on the ritual that had just been rumored until this point. According to Tamaki, the fort gears apparently made the cultists smarter by plugging them into the back of their heads. Stefan doesn't believe this. They then made sure that they understood their mission: kill 10 worshippers, neutralize its leader, and secure her. Lewe found it strange that Shi Association Section 2 personally requested their services. Stefan was impatient to start shooting, but Lewe told him to wait for his sign, as impatience was like a bunch of Morris dancers, conspicuous and largely unwanted in some places. As for that worshipper that was made into a fort gear, they were put into Eileen. She was apparently talking with them as they were moving, helped out by the larger gear made from her father. She calls for praise that another lost gear had found its way to happiness. Then she heard in her head, "Be careful," which was a warning. A warning that came to her too late, as the Full Stop office, on Lewe's order, started shooting, ignoring Eileen's pleas to stop shooting at them, to leave them alone, to live a happy life following their destined purposes. Eileen, if they don't do this, they don't get paid. They're hired killers. Their job is to make people dead. Unfortunately for the Full Stop office, Eileen was surprisingly hard to hit, due to the gears increasing her reflexes, or at least predicting the trajectories of the shots, and getting out of the way, which was digging into their expenses. Tamaki was able to read the movements of the fort gears and was able to graze her shoulder, and Li Wei decided that he'd finish her off. But she wasn't finished off. As at that moment, Argalia, the blue reverberation, saved Eileen by blocking the bullets with his apparently bulletproof coats. Clearly he had connections, as it was previously stated with the Carnival, money alone isn't enough to get that kind of quality fabric. Yep, it was pants in time for the full stop office, as this was a colour fixer, one who apparently knew Eileen's father, which was why she gladly went with Argalia when he asked if she wanted to come with him. He then asked his associate Pluto to look after Eileen, while he took care of the full stop office. They wisely decided to leg it and find a safe place to hide. Stefan didn't know why the blue reverberation was there. All Li Wei knew was that he wanted them dead. Stefan was worried about bankruptcy due to the bullets they wasted. Stefan, I think financial ruin is the least of your problems right now, considering what you're hiding from. Get your priorities straight! Tamaki noticed how useless bullets were against the blue reverberation. Well, Li Wei certainly had his priorities straight, as they needed to find a way of getting out of there alive, as they'd have a better chance of shooting themselves in the head than being able to take on Argalia, who is way above their level. They were close to the exit of the underground passage that they were travelling through, but it might as well be the other side of the city. As the blue reverberation had caught up with them, and they saw him to the left of them, they kept running, but their weapons were weighing them down, something that Argalia was fully aware of. He was apparently playing with his prey, like a cat with an insect that looks good enough for it to eat. He cruelly hinted at a lifeline coming down from the heavens. As they were hiding, Li Wei considered that they dropped their guns to make it easier to escape. Stefan and Tamaki protested at this due to how expensive they were. Where the have those two been? They're not much use to them anyway, even if Argalia was unable to deflect bullets. It was only a matter of time before Argalia would find them. Then Tamaki found an invitation to the library and handed it to Li Wei. Stefan recognized it as an urban plague threat. It was at this point that the blue reverberation found them and compared them to chicks gathered around in the cold. Li Wei tried to apologize to him and promised to forget what was seen and pleaded with him to let them go. He was willing to do that if they told him who sent them to kill Eileen in the Church of Gears. They were unwilling to breach this confidentiality, so he gave them 10 seconds to spill it, or he would spill their guts on the floor. Well, he didn't say that bit specifically, but you get the idea. Stefan then told Li Wei to use the invitation to get them out of there. He asked for a pen, and bizarrely, To Leeway's surprise and the others, Argalia handed him one, not wanting to waste any more time with that crazy. They signed their names and were out of there. Apparently the real show was about to begin, according to Argalia. Pluto, his associate that looked like a relative of W.D. Gaster, agreed with him. Anyone thinking that if they told him that they were sent by the She Association, he'd kill them anyway? Yeah. That's not outside the realms of possibility. After they watched this, Roland revealed that he was familiar with the blue reverberation. Angela noticed that it sounded similar to the red mist. Both were top-grade fixes that received a colour from the Hana Association, higher than grade 1. Angela was surprised to find a fixer of his caliber this soon. Apparently, there are a few nutcases among fixers, but the blue reverberation is so nutty, he just have to touch someone with an allergy to nuts to kill them. Roland called him a certified lunatic, although despite being someone that only a psychotic clown would think is a decent guy to be around, he had the ability, so it's not just show. Angela noticed that as he blocks the gunshots, Roland mentioned that it's the reason why guns aren't used often, as they're not that good against those that can actually fight back, such as those fitted with clothing that can withstand worse. As for why guns aren't used by the guests that they've received before them, they're about as ruinously and extortionately expensive as a vending machine in the underwater city of Rapture, and just not worth it most of the time. Well, it's not just the guns, it's also the bullets, largely because the head levies a tax on firearms. 2 full magazines cost about the same as a decent gun. I mean, in the US, in our world, putting that kind of tax on firearms would cause a riot. Considering how seriously many there consider the right to keep and bear arms. And I can understand why they would riot, even if I think that it's an amendment that sounds a little outdated, as it was written at a time when law enforcement was harder to do. Anyway, it's cheaper to give all the fixers in the office augmentation than to keep a good stock of bullets for firearms. And that's assuming that there's a workshop that can be found that deals with those. He also mentioned that it's hard to get a license for making firearms. As for why firearms are inaccessible, he thinks that it's to make sure that killings don't happen too easily. You don't know the truth, do you, Roland? As for what Angela thinks of this, well,
Angela didn't expect that the rulers of the city to be humanitarians. Not unless they're cannibals. Angela, you've seen an arbiter. Me. You have a former arbiter with you, and have seen a claw in action. Mercy and compassion are dirty words to them. And even that sounds too mild a way of putting it. Roland, he understands enough about the head and the city to know that life is worthless to them. He believes that killing shouldn't be done for no reason at all. Angela noticed that death can be insignificant as it is without guns. Roland couldn't agree with her more. He certainly couldn't argue with her there.
When the full stop office arrived, Stefan was relieved that Argalia wasn't following. Well, he doesn't have an invitation. He'd need one of those in order to do so. Liwei compared the situation to an omnipresent person toying with them. I wouldn't go that far, but he clearly knew what was happening. Tamaki understood this as well. Liwei was thankful that they were alive. Stefan was not so comforted by this. Tamaki tried to calm him. Well, he had a good reason to be like he was, due to them being in the library. Almost nothing was known about it, except that not many have entered and lived to even speak of it. They're also low on ammo, believing that they were dead anyway. Well, at least in the library you have a fighting chance. Against the blue reverberation, however, it'd be suicidal. That viewpoint was one that Tamaki shared with me. Liwei, however, agreed with Stefan that it was only a matter of time. So Tamaki was the more optimistic of them. Oh yes, and them being low on ammo was an in-universe explanation for why all their pages are single use. Then Angela appeared to greet them. Stefan greeted her in a less serious fashion, apparently accepting his fate as the latest addition to her bookcases. Angela was apparently unaware of the concept of gallows humour, as she told him seriously that it's up to him whether he gets the book they need or becomes a book, which was small comfort for Stefan. And Tamaki was seeing her as a mood killer. Liwei was more diplomatic and told her that they were in a hurry to do what they came there for and head back. Which Angela understood. Many come there for their own reasons, and she's encountered much more impolite guests. Stefan then compared her eeriness to the blue reverberation, thinking that dying to him was more merciful. Stefan, Angela is more together. Tamaki then made fun of him and told him to get on with it. Angela then let them go inside, and the three fixers put up a fight, but were ultimately defeated and provided the first range pages for the library. After that battle, Roland commented on Stefan's fatalism, how he was shouting at blaming the world until the end. Angela asked if he thought it was wrong to do so. He didn't think so. Nor did he think that Stefan was weak-willed. It's because he pities himself for living in that same world. He was more sorry that he kept trying not to blame that world. Both he and Angela cursed that world. And based on what was covered in Lobotomy Corporation and the story so far, I can't really argue with that. It'd be like condemning slavery in ancient Rome, when it was the capital of an entire empire, and even before that. Well, it was a time when slavery was considered acceptable, while over time, it slowly became much less acceptable compared to how it was in the past. The same principles apply to this. While our society might need some work, it's a paradise compared to what's in that city. It's grim dark as and somewhere where evil entities wouldn't need to lift a finger, as the corruption does itself. Well, if you're looking for bright and cheerful, you're in the wrong universe. Well, there'll be something bright next, but cheerful? Good luck with that. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!